You're afraid of what you feel. You distract yourself, stay busy, keep your distance. But the truth is, the more you try to run, the more trapped you become. There's a part of you you've learned to hide, but it's still there, silent, hungry, watching every choice you make. And until you have the courage to face it head on, you'll keep repeating the same cycles, changing cities, jobs, relationships, but never truly changing your life. Today, we're going to talk about what scares you, but sets you free, about the dark side of your soul, and why what you avoid the most might be exactly what can save you. Have you ever wondered why certain things keep haunting you, even after all this time? Even after all the therapy, all the books, all your efforts to evolve? The answer might be simpler and more brutal than you think. You're running from the most real part of who you are. There's something inside you that you've learned to hide. Something you were taught was ugly, shameful, weak, or unforgivable. And ever since then, you've lived to be everything but that. But what you repress doesn't go away. What you reject doesn't die. What you avoid looking at starts looking through you. And until you face what's behind your mask, you'll keep repeating patterns. You'll keep sabotaging yourself. And you'll keep calling it bad luck or fate. You know that impulse you feel but repress? That anger that eats you alive, but you mask with a laugh? That desire you judge as too wrong to admit? Those parts are waiting for you, silent, hidden, feeding the emptiness you feel. When everything on the outside seems fine, but inside, everything still feels wrong. You want to evolve, to grow, to have self-control, but you don't realize you're trying to build a version of yourself without integrating the most authentic parts of who you are. The shadow you hide isn't the opposite of who you are. It's the part that was left behind because it wasn't accepted, and it will show up in your relationships, in your addictions, in your existential crises, in your inability to feel peace when you're alone. Since childhood, you were shaped to fit in. Boys don't cry. Nice girls don't get angry. Hold back the tears. Be strong. Don't make a scene. And without even realizing it, you started locking away pieces of yourself in seal boxes. Every emotion you repressed became a blind spot. Every truth you ignored became a lump in your throat. Every trauma you never spoke about became a pattern you keep repeating. And now, you feel like you're carrying a weight you can't even trace. But let me tell you, it comes from everything you've forbidden yourself to feel. You're not tired of life. You're exhausted from running away from yourself. You think you're making conscious decisions, that you know what you want, what you're chasing, what you're avoiding. But you don't realize that behind every choice, there's an unresolved emotional trigger. You don't like certain people, but you don't know why. You sabotage yourself at crucial moments and call it bad luck. You're afraid of being abandoned, but pretend to be independent. The problem is, the person you pretend to be keeps sabotaging who you really are. Your unconscious isn't your enemy, but it becomes one when you don't know it. As long as you don't understand why you feel what you feel, you'll keep living trapped in a script you didn't even write. Accepting your darkness doesn't mean becoming a prisoner to it. It means stopping the fight against who you are. You don't need to heal everything to feel worthy. You don't need to eliminate your flaws to deserve love. You don't need to be perfect to be whole. You need to recognize yourself. Accept what you feel. Embrace what hurts. Talk to the part of you you're afraid to listen to. Because only when you stop pretending do you finally find peace. Not the kind of peace for social media. Not peace made of cliches, but the peace of finally coming home. Back to yourself. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's not being a slave to what controls you in silence. It's easy to identify with your good side. The part that helps, that loves, that smiles. What's hard is accepting that inside you. There's also rejection, envy, a thirst for revenge, and a fear of being forgotten. But listen, there's nothing wrong with feeling all of that. What's wrong is pretending you don't. The problem isn't feeling. It's not knowing how to deal with what you feel. It's living as if you've moved on from things you never had the courage to truly face. That there's a quote that says, "The shadow that is not seen becomes destiny." And that's exactly it. The anger you won't admit becomes illness. The neediness you hide becomes emotional dependency. The fear you bury becomes a prison. And all of that starts shaping your life. your choices, your relationships. Until one day, you stop and ask yourself, how'd I end up here? You ended up here because you never had the courage to go where it hurts the most. But it's exactly there that the way back to yourself begins. You've spent your whole life trying to become an acceptable version of yourself, trying to control impulses, repress desires, hide your traumas, trying to seem calm when you wanted to scream, strong when you were falling apart, mature when everything inside you was still begging to be held. Because they told you feeling too much was weakness, that showing pain meant neediness, that admitting anguish was a sign of defeat. So you became a master of looking fine, smiling on autopilot, saying, I'm okay, with a bleeding heart. But let me tell you something no one ever told you. You weren't born to live anesthetized. You were born to feel, to live in wholeness, to be true, even in your darkest parts. But no one taught you how to do that without losing yourself. So you learned to hide from yourself, to cut off pieces of your soul to fit what others expected, to emotionally mutilate yourself just to be loved, to build an identity on what was allowed, and bury everything that was deemed too much. But what you hide doesn't disappear. It stays there, under your skin, growing in silence, showing up in your anxiety attacks, in chaotic relationships, in your sudden rage, in your inability to sleep in peace. You might have 1,000 justifications. You might blame others, your past, the system. But deep down, what's eating you alive isn't out there. It's inside. It's the emptiness of not letting yourself be who you truly are. Because the freedom you're chasing isn't in achieving more, isn't in looking more evolved, isn't in proving how healed you are. Real freedom lives in the exact moment. You look at your pain and stop running. When you face your anger, and instead of judging it, you ask, what are you trying to tell me? You don't need to eliminate what you feel. You need to listen. You need to listen to the sadness you've been avoiding for years. The one that shows up every time you're alone. But you cover up with plans, shows, distractions, productivity. You need to look at your anger with compassion. The anger that made you lose control, say things you didn't mean, hurt people you love. But that anger was just begging you to finally take a stand, to learn to say no, to stop accepting crumbs and remember your worth. You need to hold your fear, the fear that stops you from starting, from trying, from loving again, from being seen, from being vulnerable. Because behind every fear, there's a scream for love. Fear only exists because something precious is being protected. And as long as you don't hear that scream, you'll keep being ruled by automatic reactions. You'll keep sabotaging yourself and calling life too hard. You'll stay in a cycle of effort with no meaning, emotional failure, and internal suffocation. Enough. You've bled too much trying to fit in. You've hurt yourself too deeply trying to be accepted. You stayed silent too long just to keep peace with others, while waging war inside yourself. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be whole. And being whole means having the courage to look at the shadow that lives inside you and understand that it's not your enemy. It's just the part of your soul that was forgotten, rejected, denied. The pain you feel isn't because you're weak. It's because you're trying to live with half your soul, locked in an emotional basement. And there's no peace in that. No truth. No life. Real peace doesn't come from repression. It comes from integration. From a moment you stop dividing yourself and start seeing yourself with everything you are, everything you feel, and everything you still don't know how to handle. This is the turning point. Not when everything gets resolved, but when you decide to stop abandoning yourself. You don't need to conquer yourself. You need to come home, back inside, to that inner space where your raw truth lives. And there, no audience, no judgment, no mask. You finally let yourself exist. Whole, imperfect, real, and finally, free that you've spent your life trying to fix yourself, trying to solve what wasn't right about you, trying to be strong, evolved, worthy, enough, trying to be the kind of person who doesn't feel what you feel. But what if the problem was never what you felt? What if the real problem has always been how much you reject yourself every time you feel, every time you doubt yourself, every time you abandon your own pain just to appear okay? You don't need another self-help manual. You need silence, presence, The courage to sit with what hurts without rushing to escape. There's a part of you you've exiled, locked away inside, called it too much, called it weakness, called it just the past, but it's still knocking, softly, every single day, in your dreams, in your anxiety, in your irrational fear of rejection, in those automatic reactions you don't understand, but that keep sabotaging the very things you want most. You try to move forward, but you don't integrate. You try to grow, but you grow crooked. You try to love, but you love with fear, because there's still a part of you you refuse to face. And as long as that part goes unseen, you'll keep ending up in the same place, changing cities, jobs, partners, circles, routines, but always carrying the same pain, the same emptiness, the same feeling that something's missing, even when everything seems to be in place. What's missing is the whole you, unedited, unmasked, unfiltered. You lost yourself trying to please, try to live up to expectations, trying not to be a burden. But now it's time to come back, to gather the pieces left behind, to reconnect with your essence, the one you rejected because they said it was too much. You weren't born to be perfect. You were born to be real, to grow in depth. And that takes courage, because there's no awakening without discomfort. There's no emotional freedom without facing the invisible prisons you built yourself. So now I ask you, what are you still hiding from yourself? What hurts so much that you'd rather bury it than feel it? What part of you do you still believe needs to be hidden in order to be loved? Look at it, without fear, without filters, without rushing, because it's exactly there, in the place you're afraid to touch, that the thread is waiting to pull you back to life. You don't need another reason to run. You need a reason to stay with yourself, to hold space for yourself the way no one ever did, to give yourself the love you've always searched for in other people's eyes, to say, I see you, and I won't leave you alone in here anymore. If you made it this far, it's not by accident. This is your time to stop surviving and start truly living. Now leave a comment below. What part of you still needs to be rescued? And if this video stirred something deep inside you, share it with someone who's also ready to stop pretending everything's fine. No more running. We'll meet inside,